It starts quietly. A soft morning light filters through the curtains. The world feels slower now, gentler somehow. And you, sitting by the window, notice how your body moves differently these days. The small bends, the simple stretches, they all feel heavier than before. Your back whispers, your legs hesitate. It's not pain exactly, but a reminder. A reminder that time changes us. Yet inside there's still that spark. The one that remembers walking freely, standing tall, reaching without fear. Maybe it's not about turning back the clock. Maybe it's about learning to move again, safely, softly. This story is for you, the one who still believes in small beginnings, the one who wants to trust their body again. Because strength doesn't disappear with age. It only asks to be found in a new way. And today, we begin that search. Through a gentle movement, simple yet powerful. The knee-to-toe bend. A quiet path back to comfort, balance, and confidence. Let's take the first step together. Breathe in. And begin. Helen loved her garden. Rows of lilies and lavender lined the path behind her small house. Every morning, she'd step outside with her old straw hat and a cup of tea. She'd breathe in the scent of soil and sunlight mixed together. For years, that garden was her peace, her joy, her little universe. But one spring, something began to change. She bent to pull a weed and felt a tightness run across her lower back. It wasn't sharp, but it stayed. By evening, she could feel it with every step. The next morning, she hesitated before reaching for her tools. Her hamstrings felt heavy, stiff, unwilling. Her back whispered warnings she didn't understand. So she moved slower, uncertain. The weeds grew faster than she could bend. The flowers still bloomed, but she watched more than she worked. Each day, the distance between her and the earth grew wider. And in that quiet distance, she felt something deeper than pain. It was fear. Fear that her body was slipping away from her. She told herself it was just age, that everyone slows down. But inside she missed the rhythm of bending, lifting, reaching. The freedom of not thinking about pain before moving. Her son brought her a chair for the garden. He said, "You can still enjoy it from here." She smiled, but something inside her wilted like an unwatered plant. Weeks turned into months, and she stopped noticing the sunrise. Her movements became cautious, measured like walking on glass. Every time she bent forward, her back clenched in protest. Her hamstrings felt like old ropes, frayed and unwilling to stretch. Helen began to believe that movement belonged to younger bodies, that her time for bending and reaching was over. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she sat by the window. The sky turned gold, and a memory came back, her dancing barefoot in the rain. Her feet light, her laughter easy. She remembered the feeling of trust between her and her body. How simple it once was to move without thought. Tears came quietly, not from sadness but longing. She whispered to herself, "I just want to move without fear." That night she searched for answers. Not miracle cures, just something real, something gentle. She found stories of people like her, older, careful, but still moving. They spoke of simple exercises, safe bends, slow stretches. Movements designed for trust, not toughness. Among them, one phrase kept appearing, knee-to-toe bend. The words felt humble, approachable like a conversation, not a command. Helen read about it, watched quietly, and felt a spark of hope. It wasn't about touching her toes. It was about reconnecting with herself. She decided she would try. Just one small bend, one breath at a time. Because maybe, just maybe, movement wasn't gone. It was waiting for her to return. The next morning, Helen woke early. The garden was still wet with dew, the air cool and quiet. She stood by the window and watched the light move across the grass. Her back felt stiff, like it always did. She stretched a little, testing the space between comfort and pain. It was a narrow space, fragile, but it was still there. For a moment, she wondered how it had come to this. How something as simple as bending had become a struggle. It hadn't happened overnight. Years of sitting, years of not moving enough had crept in silently. Her muscles forgot what freedom felt like. Her posture slowly folded forward, like a leaf curling at its edge. And each time she sat too long, her hamstrings shortened a little more. Her lower back carried the weight her legs could no longer share. The body always remembers balance, but it also remembers habits. And Helen's body had learned stillness too well. The pain was not her enemy, it was a message. A quiet voice saying, something has to change. She never thought of her body as something that needed understanding. But now, she began to listen differently. She realized how each step, each bend, told a story of connection. When one part weakens, another part compensates. When the legs tighten, the back takes the burden. When movement stops, strength fades in silence. It wasn't about age, it was about awareness. The body had always been speaking, she just hadn't been listening. She sat down and took a slow breath. Her mind began tracing the small choices that led her here. The long hours in her armchair. The way she hurried chores to save her back, only making it stiffer. The way she stopped walking when pain appeared, instead of moving gently through it. She thought of how life trains us to sit, to stay still, to rest instead of move. But rest too long becomes rust. And rust is not what the body was made for. She closed her eyes and pictured her spine, her legs, her breath. She imagined them working together, not against each other. The back trusting the legs again. The legs moving with ease. The breath guiding every motion like a soft rhythm. She didn't need youth, she needed balance. Her body didn't need punishment, it needed partnership. This realization felt light, freeing. For the first time in months, she didn't feel broken, she felt curious. Curious about what her body could still learn. Maybe pain wasn't a wall. Maybe it was a doorway, waiting for her to walk through slowly. She whispered to herself, I can start again. And with that thought she stood. Her back straightened a little, her chest opened. The stiffness was still there, but it didn't scare her anymore. Because now she understood the message. Her body wasn't failing her, it was asking for her attention. And she was finally ready to listen. Helen stood in the middle of her living room. The morning sun stretched across the floor, warm and quiet. She placed her hands on the back of a chair for balance. Her breath was steady, but a little nervous. She had read about the movement again last night, the knee-to-toe bend. It sounded simple, almost too simple. But simplicity was what she needed now. She took a deep breath and whispered, let's just see. Her feet stood hip-width apart, grounding her like roots in the earth. Her toes pointed forward, soft and steady. She bent her knees slightly, feeling the weight shift through her legs. Her body hesitated, unsure of what would happen next. But she moved slowly, letting her hands travel down her thighs. Her breath guided her, deep and gentle. She stopped before the stretch became sharp. Her hamstrings spoke, not in pain but in memory. They remembered what it meant to move, to release, to trust. She held there, halfway to her knees, breathing. Each exhale felt like a conversation with her body. A quiet voice saying, it's okay to move again. When she rose back up, she felt warmth spread through her legs. It wasn't strength yet, but it was life. She tried again, slower this time, listening more closely. Her knees bent, her spine followed like a ribbon unrolling. She didn't force anything. She allowed. And that small difference changed everything. The third time, she reached a little farther. Her fingertips brushed her shins, and she smiled. It wasn't about distance, It was about trust. Her breath became the rhythm of the movement. Inhale as she lowered, exhale as she rose. Her back lengthened instead of collapsing. Her hamstrings stretched instead of resisting. It was a dance between caution and courage. The movement was gentle, but it carried meaning. For the first time in months, she wasn't fighting her body. She was moving with it. Her heart softened as she realized how much fear she had been carrying. Fear of hurting herself. Fear of not being able to return to the garden. But each slow bend told her a new truth. Her body wasn't fragile, it was patient. It had been waiting for her to listen, to lead with kindness. She practiced for 5 minutes, maybe less. Yet when she finished, her body felt different. Lighter. Awake. Her back hummed with warmth, her legs alive with quiet energy. Helen sat down, smiling through a soft breath. It was such a small act, but it felt like reclaiming something precious. She didn't know what tomorrow's movement would look like. But she knew this. Her body had opened its door again. And she was ready to keep walking through it, one gentle bend at a time. The next day, Helen woke with a quiet sense of curiosity. Her body felt slightly sore, but in a good way. Not the kind of pain that warns you to stop, but the kind that whispers, "You moved." She stretched her arms overhead and felt the pull through her back. It wasn't stiffness this time, it was awareness. Every muscle seemed to be waking from a long sleep. She smiled and thought, maybe this is what healing feels like. As she stood, she remembered what she'd learned about the body's design. How every part connects, how every movement matters. When she bent her knees yesterday, she didn't just stretch her legs. She gave her back permission to relax. The knees acted as partners, not bystanders. Her hamstrings didn't tighten in fear, they opened in trust. It was all about coordination, not force. She realized that bending safely was a conversation between strength and surrender. When she moved gently, her nervous system stayed calm. Her breath guided her, reminding her that control didn't mean tension. It meant awareness. Helen began to notice the science behind the feeling. Each bend increased blood flow to her muscles, warming them from within. Her joints began to move more fluidly, like a door finally oiled after years of creaking. The tiny muscles around her spine supported her, instead of collapsing under strain. She imagined her body as an orchestra, every note in harmony. When the legs worked with the back, the music returned. When they worked against each other, chaos followed. For so long, her movements had been filled with fear. Now, every slow bend was a step toward balance. She thought about how life teaches us to rush everything. We lift too fast, sit too long, and breathe too little. But the body doesn't need speed. It needs rhythm. It needs patience. And patience, she realized, was also strength. She practiced again that morning, this time by the window. The sunlight felt like encouragement on her shoulders. She bent down, knees soft, spine long, eyes calm. Her fingertips touched the tops of her shoes. Her breath flowed without hesitation. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. And peace, she thought, is the real goal of movement. When she stood up, her reflection in the window caught her attention. She looked taller somehow, not by inches but by presence. Her shoulders were open, her chest lifted. Her back didn't ache, it supported her like an old friend. For the first time in years, she felt connected from head to toe. Every inhale expanded her. Every exhale released something she no longer needed. Helen laughed softly, shaking her head. Who would have thought something so small could change so much? The body, she realized, doesn't heal through power, it heals through kindness. And with each knee-to-toe bend, she was learning the language of kindness again. Weeks passed, and Helen's mornings began to change. She no longer hesitated before moving. The fear that once shadowed her steps had softened into trust. Each day, she practiced her gentle bends beside the garden window. Her hands reached a little farther, her breath a little deeper. It wasn't about how far she could go. It was about how calm she could stay. The movement had become her ritual, a quiet conversation with her body. The stiffness that once ruled her mornings now felt like a memory. Her hamstrings, once tight and heavy, began to stretch with grace. Her back no longer complained when she leaned forward. Instead, it supported her, strong and steady like the trunk of a tree. Helen noticed changes beyond the physical. Her mood lifted, her sleep deepened, her confidence returned. She felt lighter, not just in her body but in her spirit. It was as if movement had unlocked a door she didn't know existed. Each time she bent down, she found not just flexibility but peace. She could breathe without fear of pain. She could move without thinking about what might go wrong. Her world felt open again, alive with possibility. One morning, she walked outside to the garden. The ground was cool beneath her feet, damp with dew. She hadn't touched the soil in months. Her hands trembled as she reached for a small weed near the lilies. She bent down slowly, knees soft, breath steady. Her fingertips met the earth without pain. For a moment she stayed there, breathing in the scent of life. It was more than just a stretch, it was a return. She felt tears on her cheeks but didn't wipe them away. They weren't from sadness. They were from recognition. Her body was capable, her spirit unbroken. She had walked through fear and found trust waiting on the other side. That night she called her son. Her voice was calm, but filled with quiet pride. "I worked in the garden again," she said softly. He smiled through the phone, though she couldn't see it. "That's wonderful, Mom. How did it feel?" She paused, then laughed gently. "Like I came home." And in that moment, she realized healing isn't loud. It doesn't arrive all at once or announce its presence. It comes in whispers, in small victories, in steady breaths. Her body had taught her that. Her patience had nurtured it. The knee-to-toe bends were no longer just exercises. They were reminders of resilience, of grace, of renewal. Helen didn't chase youth, she found balance instead. And with every gentle bend, she thanked her body. For staying, for waiting, for learning to trust again. As the sun set over her blooming garden, Helen stood tall. Not young again, but whole. Helen began to notice how many people moved with hesitation. At the park, she saw older men stretching stiffly by the benches. At the market, women rubbed their lower backs after lifting small bags. They all carried the same look she once had, the quiet worry of pain returning. She wanted to tell them that movement could be kind, that safety and strength could exist together. One afternoon, her neighbor, Mrs. Dale, stopped by for tea. She watched Helen move easily around the kitchen, surprised by her calm grace. "You seem different lately," she said. "You walk lighter somehow." Helen smiled and nodded. "I started moving again," she said softly, slowly but with purpose. Mrs. Dale tilted her head. "Moving, you mean exercising." Helen chuckled, not quite, more like listening. She explained the simple rhythm of the knee-to-toe bend. How she began with fear but found trust instead. How it wasn't about pushing harder, but about moving smarter. Mrs. Dale looked uncertain. "I've been afraid to bend. My back, it tightens so easily." Helen reached out, her voice warm. "Then we start with breath." Together, they stood near the window. Helen guided her through the first gentle movement. Feet steady, knees soft, hands sliding just to the knees. "Stop before it hurts," she said. "Breathe when it feels safe." Mrs. Dale exhaled slowly, her body trembling a little. Then she smiled. "That wasn't so bad." Helen nodded, eyes soft. "That's where it begins." The next morning, they met again. Then another neighbor joined. Soon, 3 women gathered in Helen's garden every week. They laughed, they breathed, they moved slowly under the open sky. The garden became more than a place for flowers. It became a place for renewal. Helen watched them bend, rise, and find courage again. Every motion carried meaning. Every smile carried healing. She realized this was what it meant to share movement. Not to teach perfection, but to remind others of possibility. The knee-to-toe bends had become a symbol of care, of rediscovering. Helen didn't lead like a coach, she guided like a friend. Move with kindness, she would say. Let your body trust you again. The women listened, their laughter mixing with birdsong. Each session ended with stillness and gratitude. For their legs that carried them. For their backs that supported them. For their breath that reminded them they were alive. As the weeks passed, Helen saw transformation, not in bodies but in spirits. Fear gave way to calm. Pain turned into understanding. Movement became something sacred again. And in those quiet moments, Helen often thought of her first morning by the window. How she once feared even a small bend. Now she moved freely, surrounded by others doing the same. It wasn't just healing. It was a return to trust, shared and multiplied. And every time she bent toward her toes, she whispered inside, "Thank you, body, we made it back." The sun was low when Helen finished her morning stretch. The garden shimmered in soft gold, quiet and alive. She stood still, breathing deeply, feeling every part of herself awake. Her back was strong, her legs steady, her heart calm. Movement no longer frightened her. It felt like home. She thought of all the days she had doubted her body. All the times she believed age meant ending. But now she knew the truth. It was never about going back. It was about going forward gently, with awareness. Her body had not betrayed her. It had waited for her. Waited for patience, for kindness, for courage to return. The knee-to-toe bends had given her more than strength. They had given her connection, peace, and gratitude. As she looked at the sky, she smiled softly. Healing, she realized, is not a miracle. It's a practice of trust, repeated in small steps. And every small step matters. She whispered, "Thank you," to her body, to the morning, to herself. Then she bent once more, steady and free. And the world, for a moment, felt perfectly in tune.